Hello, my friends and fellow humans. I thought it'd be fun to talk about Wasteland World, kind of my design principles, how this fits in with EZD6 core, and what the heck is a playset anyway. So I'm going to use this for reference, but let's talk about all these interesting things with this game. Now, Wasteland World is a great example of taking a game and modifying it to be another playset, which I use the term playset to mean another setting for EZD6. I love post-apocalyptic worlds, and I wanted to make my own with EZD6. But just like the core EZD6, I didn't want to necessarily pigeonhole you into the whole thing, right? I don't have some great history or some, all this lore and all this kind of stuff in the game. I want to have enough lore to give you a framework that you can build upon, right? Because I like it when the players and the rabble rouser come up with their own things for the world. And I think the best place to start with that is kind of give a basic idea of what the thing is and then let the players fill in all the details. That's the really fun part. So what I did with Wasted World is I wanted some kind of catastrophe that would end the world. It was a little bit different. But I also wanted to have psychic powers. And so I thought that some weird kind of psychic storm engulfed the earth, and it would give some people psychic powers. And that would be a great way to explain all the weirdness and wackiness of Wasted World. How the miasma, or some people call it the demon sky, changed the planet. Mutated creatures gave some people psychic powers, and that kind of thing. So that's where I started with the lore of the game, and that's pretty much as far as it goes. I leave it for you to fill in all the details of that, right? And I think that's the fun part of the game. Now, my way to get that across is I have key truths of Wasted World, and it's just a few bullet points that tell you a quick history. So I think, like I said, I think that's neat because it gets you up to speed quickly on kind of the basics of the game, but it lets you fill in all the details because no one really knows what happened, right? No one really knows in the game world necessarily what happened, and that's for you and the players to work out and discover. So instead of hero paths in the game, I have survivor paths, okay? And I wanted to do a few things differently with this, partly to spice up the rules a little bit, but also because the setting kind of demanded it, right? So in EZD6 core, you take your hero path, you get some boons and stuff from that, and some powers, and then there's some inclinations, okay? And that's the main place where you build your character. So I wanted to do a few different things with Wasted World. One was I actually gave the characters more inclinations, and I started them with an edge. So an edge is it's like a specific inclination for that path, for that survivor path. And I've got some really great ones in there. It's actually, in my opinion, it's really hard to choose which edge you're going to take because both of them are so great. But the edges are there, so individualize your character even more, but with inclinations. Now, something I decided to do with this game was some of the survivors just take from the regular inclination list, but some of the survivors, like muties, weirds, which are psychers, androids, they take from the survivor talent list or the inclination list, like normal survivors, but they also have their own lists. So with the android, there's a specific list for and only the android that you can take. And you have to take a certain number of regular inclinations as well as specific inclinations for that particular type. So if you're doing a weird, you could take some survivor paths, but you also want to take some psychic powers. Or with the mutant, right? You can take some mutant powers, which are separate. So very cool with the separate lists. I think it really adds a lot of flavor and makes those survivor paths feel really unique. I also have a survivor path named a Jack, and the Jack is totally open to how you want to do it, right? So it's just the Jack is just built from all inclinations. So it's kind of the Delver on steroids, right? And the Edge for the jack is just to pick another inclination. There's no specific edge for the jack. It's just you pick an extra inclination. So it's really for those people who just want to totally build their own character. The jack is a great way to go. And just like EZD6 Core, there are a list of aspects, but I've got a lot more in the list for you to use. I've got actually 3 categories of aspects. So there's 60 aspects in the book, a lot more than in the core book, to modify your character, or as always, just make your own aspects, right? Getting into the Wasteland, I want to detail a few things, and the first are holds. Holds are kind of the last remnants of civilization that survivors can go to and replenish, refuel, sleep, all that kind of thing, and probably get some quests from, right? So holds are those last remnants of civilization that you can go to in the game. I also detail what's in a hold, right? So there's a dock shop where you can get healed. There's some of them have battle cages where you can fight. A recharge station where you can recharge tech. Hostels. If you're really poor, you can go to rat holes. They're just like kind of cubbies you can sleep in. So all these are detailed in the book as far as what you might find in a hold. So just like EZD6 Core, I have money levels wealth levels for the characters, right? And wealth is called scratch. So it's little bits of metal that have holds, the holds logo kind of stamped into them, and they're used for cash. And then the different levels I have are skint, where you can barely afford any supplies, hard up, stiff, shiny, chrome, or loaded. So those all kind of equivalent to the EZD6 Core wealth levels, but the flavored for the Wasteland. As a design aspect, one thing I've always felt about certain games is like, oh, you can play this game for any setting, right? That's a bit dubious, I don't think that a certain system works great for every setting, right? Without a little bit of tweaking. That's not to say you can't use a system for every setting, but I think it needs tweaking. You can't straight out of the box. And that's what I tried to do. I tried to tweak Wasted World to fit the themes of scarcity and that kind of desperation in a wasted land that you might find, where you won't necessarily have that in a fantasy game, right? You're not necessarily scrounging for food and all this kind of stuff. So I wanted to have that. Also, in EZD6 Core, we don't really worry that much about inventory, right? But I do have an inventory system in Wasted World because it feels right. It feels like you should limit, there are a couple reasons. It feels like you should limit what people carry because of the scarcity. But also, another difference is, in Wasted World, there are all kinds of great gear and weapons, right? And if you just let players kind of go crazy, they could carry too much stuff, right? So this kind of limits it. Whereas a fantasy game, if you're a barbarian warrior or whatever, you might have a sword, a dagger, a bow, and some gear on you. And you're not going to you don't need to really worry about that too much, right? But if you're in Wasted World and you're picking up an assault rifle and 2 submachine guns and 6 pistols, then it starts to get crazy because there's all these high-tech weapons and all this cool stuff that you want to carry, but the inventory limits you to a reasonable amount, right? It's very generous, but it's still a reasonable amount, and I think it really fits with the kind of world that Wasted World is. It's a world of scarcity, and it's a world of a bunch of great stuff that you're going to want. Unlike, like I said, within a fantasy game where you're going to have your kind of standard package, right? Now, one problem I faced with the scarcity was, how do I do bullets and food and water? You can track all that stuff separately, right? But that's a real pain to do, right? That's, how many meals you got and how many bullets and all this kind of stuff for each gun. So I didn't want to go crazy with that because that's not the EZD6 way. So what I did is I came up with a generic rule called supplies. And supplies represent several things. They represent your food and water, and they represent your bullets. Okay, so the great thing about that is when you have your food and water meal for the day, you just subtract it off your supplies. You don't subtract it off food and water, all this kind of stuff. And when you shoot for the day, you subtract your ammunition off. That's it. So that would be 2 supply that you used that day because you shot your gun and you had a meal. Okay, you had your daily meal. So that's a great way to track this stuff without having individual things in your inventory that you have to worry about. I don't like the micromanaging, right? That's what this game is about. It tries to get rid of that, and so supplies are my way to keep it limited. Because if you run out of supplies, you can't shoot your weapons, right? You have no ammunition, or you don't have any food, which means you don't heal for that night's rest. Also, 3 days without food and water, you're starting to starve to death. You're starting to dehydrate and starve to death. So that's super easy way to track all this complicated stuff without complicated rules, right? Or just without a bunch of bookkeeping. And you can acquire supplies from looting. You can get them from holds when you go to holds. You roll to see how many supplies extra the hold has, and then you can pick those up. Depending on your wealth levels, right? Depending on your wealth levels also determines like how much gear you can buy at a hold when you go in and buy stuff, right? And you can change it every week. The R can roll every week, and then the supplies and stuff will change, or the gear and the supplies level will change, right? But the real thing of Wasted World is scrap. That's the real currency because nothing gets built without scrap, right? So if your players find, a place and they want to, make it defensible and this kind of thing, they could go get scrap. They could try to find scrap and build a fence around it or build, fortifications or whatever. This is a great driver to get the players to go out and adventure because they're always looking for scrap. And even one class, the Scabby, is great at finding scrap, right? They kind of have a nose for it. They're great at getting through scrap, dangerous terrain, and they're great at finding it. So even one of the survivor paths is geared towards scrap. And scrap is the real money, the real driver of the Wasteland to get your heroes out there to do some stuff, right? Find that scrap. Now, in EZD6 core, there's essentially two kind of zones of play, right? There's a near where you're in combat, where you're in close combat range, and then there's the far, which is, basically bow range, right? So in this game, though, there are really long-range weapons like sniper rifles and this kind of thing, or high-tech weapons. So I've added 2 zones to those, right? There's the near and far. There's also long and extreme, and I explain in the book what those mean. But that gives you some chance to use those really long-range weapons like sniper rifles. So I've got all that stuff you'd expect for the Wasteland, right? I've got kind of standard weapons, Molotovs, pipe bombs, pistols, bows, crossbows. But I've also got fun weapons like modded melee weapons, like electrified or spiked or whirring blades. I've also got modded special guns like burners, grappling guns, nailer guns. Also got another thing that the game does is weapon quality, right? So cobbled weapons are essentially like junk weapons that most people have that have been cobbled together. So they break on a 1. Okay, if you roll a 1 when you're attacking, the weapon breaks or jams. That's interesting with like a warrior, Wasteland warrior. If you have a boon to your roll, you'd have to roll 2 1s for the weapon to break or jam because you're better at fighting, so you're better at knowing how much to push a weapon, right? So that's pretty cool. Also, there's grenade rules for grenades. There is, and all this stuff you can carry for your backpack. I call cell phones wonder slabs because, most of them don't work anymore, but, they don't do the phone stuff, but there's all kinds of stuff on a cell phone, think about it, that you can use as you adventure, like voice recorders or cameras, that kind of stuff, or just play games to keep from going nuts, right? So just all that kind of folding stuff, or all that kind of fun stuff. Got junk armor and junk shields, and creamy cake is a special treat that's been, has so many preservatives in it that survive the apocalypse, and just little fun little stuff like that. Also, lots of drugs, which on the character sheet you can essentially carry an unlimited supply of drugs because they're just so small, right? They're small. They come in little bottles or packs, and you can carry, hundreds of them easily without it being any kind of, hindrance on you, right? Now, this is as far as we'll go today, but next time I will talk about the Apocalypse driving course, which are vehicle rules for Wasted World. Now, I had to have, for all those Mad Max lovers, I had to have some really fun, vehicle rules for the game. And I think I managed to get the fun of the vehicle rules without being too rulesy, right? Because you don't want it to be a war game. You don't have to keep shutting down the game to look up rules. And the rules are so easy and fit in with the rule set so well that you're not going to have to look them up. Maybe once or twice you might have to look something up, and then you're done. That's it. So we'll talk about driving next time.
If you'd like to pick up Wasted World, go to Runehammer Online and shop, and you can find it down there. But you also have the 3-book collection, which is a great deal for all 3 EZD6 books, or you could just pick up Wasted World itself.